I sat in the parking lot of the logistics warehouse where I'd spent the last 7 years of my life moving boxes. The engine of my 2008 Honda Civic was idling, making that rattling noise it always made when the weather got cold. On my lap was a lukewarm gas station sandwich. In my hand was my phone. I must have refreshed the screen 50 times. I closed the app. I reopened it. I turned my phone off, counted to 10, turned it back on, and logged in again. The numbers were still there. $50,000. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the steering wheel in excitement. I just stopped breathing. For a solid minute, the world went completely silent. The hum of the warehouse fans, the rattle of my engine, the distant honking of trucks on the highway, it all just vanished. For 34 years, I had lived life with a heavy, invisible backpack strapped to my shoulders. That backpack was filled with student loans, credit card debt from medical emergencies, rent anxiety, and the constant gnawing fear that one flat tire would ruin my entire month. I was a logistics manager, which was a fancy title for an overworked guy who made sure trucks left on time while eating ramen 4 nights a week. In that moment, staring at the screen, I felt the backpack fall off. The relief wasn't joyful. It was exhausting. I slumped back against the torn fabric of my seat and wept. I cried for the missed vacations, the skipped meals, and the nights I spent staring at the ceiling wondering if I'd ever retire. The next few weeks were a blur of calculated silence. I didn't quit my job immediately. I didn't run into the boss's office and flip a table. I'm not that guy. I'm Alan. I'm the guy who cleans up the break room even when it's not his turn. I believe in order. I hired a tax attorney from 3 towns over, someone who didn't know me, didn't know my family, and didn't care about local gossip. We set up a blind trust. After the lump sum penalty and the taxes, I walked away with roughly $32 million. $32 million. The first thing I did was pay off my debt. Clicking Submit Payment on my $42,000 student loan balance was more satisfying than any luxury car could ever be. Watching the balance hit 0.00 was a spiritual experience. Then I helped my inner circle. I have 2 friends, Mark and Sarah, who stuck by me when I was at my lowest. When I couldn't afford heating oil 2 winters ago, Mark came over with a space heater and paid my bill without asking for a dime back. I paid off their mortgages anonymously. I told them it was a bank error or a contest entry they must have forgotten. They didn't buy it, of course, but I swore them to secrecy. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't buy a penthouse in Manhattan. I bought peace. I found a farmhouse about an hour outside of the city. It sat on 20 acres of land, backed up against a dense forest. It had 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a barn that needed work. It was nice, very nice, but it wasn't a castle. It was a home. I traded the rattling Civic for a new Ford F-150. Not the fully loaded model with the massaging seats, just a solid, reliable truck that could haul lumber for the barn repairs. I spent my days fixing fences and reading books on the porch. For the first time in my life, I was sleeping 8 hours a night. My blood pressure dropped. The grey hairs stopped multiplying. I was happy. I was safe. Or so I thought. I had been incredibly careful. I used a P.O. box. I used a lawyer for everything. But you can't hide everything in a small world. My cousin, Greg, worked at the regional bank branch, where the initial deposit had to be verified before moving to the high-yield accounts. Greg was a talker. He was the kind of guy who thought confidentiality was just a suggestion. I didn't know he knew until I went into town to pick up hardware supplies. I walked into the local diner to grab a coffee, and the chatter stopped. Heads turned. People I hadn't spoken to since high school were suddenly waving at me, their smiles wide and predatory. "Hey, Alan, long time no see, buddy." "Alan, you look great. We should grab a beer sometime." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I grabbed my coffee and walked out, but my phone was already buzzing. Friend requests from people who used to bully me. LinkedIn messages from entrepreneurs with great investment opportunities. And then, the one notification I had been dreading for a decade. A text message from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. Mum. The text was short. We heard the news. Call us. We need to talk about the family. I stared at the screen, standing next to my brand new truck in the hardware store parking lot. The piece I had bought was shattering. The backpack wasn't gone. It had just been waiting in the bushes. They found me. I didn't answer the text. I blocked the number. For 3 days, I lived in a state of high alert anxiety. Every time a car drove down the country road past my property, my muscles tensed. I found myself checking the security cameras on my phone every 10 minutes. It was pathetic, really. I was a grown man, a multimillionaire, hiding in my own house because I was afraid of 2 people in their 60s. But anyone who has grown up with narcissistic parents knows that age doesn't soften them. It just makes them more desperate. It was a Tuesday afternoon when they finally showed up. I was on the front porch, staining the railing, enjoying the smell of cedar and fresh air. I saw the dust cloud first. A silver Buick, at least 10 years old, crunched up my long gravel driveway. I didn't recognize the car, but I recognized the driving style: aggressive, taking the corners too fast, oblivious to the potholes. I didn't run inside. I didn't lock the doors. I put down my paintbrush, wiped my hands on a rag, and stood at the top of the stairs. I was the king of this castle, and I refused to cower. The car door opened, and there they were, Robert and Linda, my father and mother. They looked older, certainly. Robert's stomach pushed against his polo shirt, his hair thinner and grayer. Linda had that tight, pinched look around her mouth that came from years of pursing her lips in judgment. She was wearing a floral blouse that looked like something a sweet grandmother would wear, a costume designed to disarm. "Alan!" Linda shrieked. It wasn't a greeting. It was a performance. She threw her arms wide, rushing toward the steps as if we were estranged lovers reuniting on a rainy pier. "Oh, look at you, my boy!" She hurried up the stairs, aiming to wrap me in a hug. I didn't step forward. I didn't open my arms. I took one deliberate step back. She hugged the empty air where I had been standing, stumbled slightly, and then composed herself with a terrifyingly quick smile. "Oh, you're still so shy, just like when you were little." "I'm not shy, Linda," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm just not interested." Robert climbed the stairs slower, his eyes darting around. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the fresh siding, the wraparound porch, the brand new truck parked in the driveway. He was appraising the assets. "Nice place," Robert grunted, finally making eye contact. His eyes were cold, hard beads. "Bit far from town, though. You always did make things difficult for yourself." "What do you want?" I asked. I didn't offer them lemonade. I didn't offer them a seat. "Is that how you talk to your parents?" Robert scoffed, hooking his thumbs into his belt loops. "We haven't seen you in, what, 6 years? We heard the good news, son. We just came to congratulate you." "You came because you heard I have money," I corrected him. "You didn't come when I graduated. You didn't come when I got married. You certainly didn't come when I got divorced." "We gave you space," Linda chimed in, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We knew you were independent. We raised you to be independent, didn't we, Bob? We made him strong." I almost laughed. That was their word for it. Independent. The truth was, they had treated me like an unwanted tenant since I was old enough to walk. There were no family vacations. There were no I love yous. There was only a ledger. When I got my first job at 14 bagging groceries, Robert demanded 40% of my paycheck for room and board. They kept a running tally of my debts, clothes, school supplies. even the electricity I used for my alarm clock. They didn't beat me. They just made sure I knew, every single day, that I was a financial burden they resented carrying. "Cut the act," I said, crossing my arms. "State your business or I'm calling the sheriff to have you trespassed." Robert's face darkened. The pleasant uncle mask slipped, revealing the bully underneath. "Fine," Robert said. "We're struggling, Alan. The economy has been hell on us. The house is falling apart. My back is bad. I can't work like I used to. Your mother needs dental work she can't afford. And you're sitting on $50 million, Robert snapped, his voice rising. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We sacrificed our own comfort so you could eat. It's payback time." "We've crunched the numbers," Linda added, pulling a folded piece of paper out of her purse. It was actual lined notebook paper. "Considering inflation and pain and suffering and the cost of raising a child in the 90s, plus interest." She handed the paper to me. I unfolded it. In messy handwriting, they had itemized my childhood. Food, $50,000. Rent, 0 to 18, $150,000. Emotional labor, $500,000. At the bottom, there was a nice round number. Total due, $10,000. $10 million, I read aloud. I looked up at them. "You want $10 million because you didn't legally abandon me?" "It's fair," Robert said, puffing out his chest. "It's less than a third of what you have. You'll still be rich, but we'll be comfortable. It's the least you can do after we gave you life." "And a monthly stipend?" Linda added quickly. $5,000 a month. For groceries and utilities. We're getting old, Alan. You have a duty." I looked at the paper again. Then, slowly, calmly, I tore it in half. Then, in half again. I dropped the confetti onto the porch floor. "No," I said. Linda gasped. "Alan, how dare you? I owe you nothing," I said, feeling that familiar childhood fear rising up, but crushing it down with my adult logic. "You took rent from a 14-year-old. You kicked me out on my 18th birthday with a trash bag of clothes and told me good luck. You haven't called in a decade except to ask for money. That's not parenting. That's a transaction. And the contract expired a long time ago." Robert took a step toward me, his face turning a blotchy red. "You ungrateful little bastard. You think you're big time now? You think you're better than us?" "I'm offering you a deal," I said, interrupting him, "because I'm a better man than you taught me to be." I pulled my checkbook out of my back pocket. I always carried it now. I wrote a check quickly, leaning against the porch railing. $10,000, I said, ripping the check out. I held it out to Robert. "This is for the dental work. Take this, get in your car, and never ever come back here. If you contact me again, if you step foot on this land, I will spend every dime of my fortune making sure you regret it." Robert looked at the check. For a second, greed flickered in his eyes. 10 grand was a lot of money to them, but his pride was bigger. He snatched the check from my hand, crumbled it into a ball, and threw it at my face. 10,000, he screamed. Spittle flew from his mouth. "You insult us? With pocket change? I spent more than that on your damn braces." "I never had braces, Robert," I said quietly. "You will rue this day," Linda hissed, her face contorted into something ugly and sharp. "You think you can just discard us? We have rights. We have rights in this state. You'll be hearing from us." "Let's go, Linda," Robert growled. He turned back to me, pointing a shaking finger. "You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. Don't think your money can protect you from the law." They stomped down the stairs. The car doors slammed so hard I felt the vibration in the porch floorboards. They spun the tires in the gravel, spraying rocks everywhere, and sped off down the driveway. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle. I looked down at the crumbled check on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. They had mentioned rights. They had mentioned the law. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. "Jim," I said when he answered. "It's Alan. They were just here." Did you give them money? Henderson asked immediately. I tried, they threw it at me. Good, Henderson sighed. But brace yourself, son. If they're talking about rights, they've probably been talking to a lawyer. In this state, filial responsibility isn't just a suggestion, it's a statute. Get your records ready, the war is coming. He was right. The peace was officially over. The silence lasted exactly 3 weeks. For 21 days, I foolishly allowed myself to believe that Robert and Linda had given up. I thought maybe, just maybe, my threat had worked. I went back to fixing the barn. I planted a vegetable garden. I started sleeping through the night again. But predators don't give up. They just change tactics. They stop hunting and start trapping. It was a Monday morning when the trap sprung. I was in the driveway loading the back of my truck with old scrap wood when a white sedan pulled in. It wasn't my parents. It was a stranger, a heavy-set man with a bored expression and a clipboard. Are you Alan Miller? He asked, not stepping out of the car, just rolling down the window. I am, I said, putting down a piece of lumber. He extended a hand through the window. You've been served. He dropped a thick yellow envelope onto the gravel driveway, rolled up his window, and backed out before I could even take a breath. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. The return address was a law firm I recognized from billboards on the highway, Snyder & Associates, a firm known for aggressive personal injury cases, the kind of lawyers who chase ambulances and advertise on the back of bus stop benches. I tore it open. Superior Court of the State. Plaintiffs: Robert and Linda Miller. Defendant: Alan Miller. Action: petition for parental support under filial responsibility statutes. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew these laws existed. Mr. Henderson had warned me, but seeing it in black and white was nauseating. I flipped through the pages. It was a work of fiction that would have made Stephen King jealous. Paragraph 4. The plaintiffs are destitute, unable to afford basic necessities, medication, and housing repairs. Paragraph 7. The defendant possesses extraordinary financial means, $50,000 lottery windfall. Paragraph 9. The defendant has refused reasonable requests for assistance, leaving his elderly parents in a state of neglect. They were demanding a lump sum of $500,000 for retroactive care and a monthly stipend of $15,000 indefinitely. But the lawsuit was just the legal attack. The social attack began that evening. I was making dinner when my phone started buzzing. It wasn't a call. It was a barrage of notifications. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. I didn't even use Facebook anymore, but I still had the app. I opened it. My feed was flooded. My cousin Greg, the leak, had shared a video. It was a clip from the local 6 Mapuwiswang PM news. The caption read, "Unbelievable. Money really does change people. Shame on you, Alan." I pressed play. The camera was zoomed in on my mother's face. She was sitting on her living room couch, clutching a tissue. The lighting was dim, designed to make their house look like a hovel. "We just don't know what we did wrong," Linda sobbed into the microphone. "We gave him everything. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his private tutors. We bought him his first car. We sacrificed our retirement so he could go to that fancy college. Lies, all lies. I went to public school. I walked to school. I bought my first car, a rusted beater with money I earned mowing lawns. I went to community college on a Pell Grant." The camera panned to Robert, who sat with his arm around her, looking stoic and grim. "It's not about the money," Robert lied smoothly. "It's about family. We're sick. Linda needs surgery on her hip. We reached out to him, asked for help, and he laughed in our faces. He's living in a mansion, and he told us to starve." The reporter's voiceover came on, dripping with judgment. A local lottery winner, flush with $50 million, turns his back on the parents who raised him. Tonight, we ask, is this the cost of greed? I threw my phone across the room. It hit the couch cushions and bounced off. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. It was a character assassination. In a small town, reputation is currency, and they had just bankrupted me. The next day, I had to go into town to meet Mr. Henderson. I tried to keep my head down, pulling my baseball cap low. It didn't work. When I stopped at the gas station, the attendant EA guy I'd known for years, a guy I'd tipped $20 just last week, sneered at me. "Must be nice," he muttered as I swiped my card. "Leaving your folks to rot." "It's not true, Mike," I said, my voice tight. "I saw the news, man," he spat. "My mum has a bad hip. I'd give anything to help her. You make me sick." I walked out without getting my receipt. When I got to Mr. Henderson's office, I was shaking with rage. I slammed the yellow envelope on his mahogany desk. "Fix this," I said. "Countersue them for defamation, slander, libel, anything." Mr. Henderson looked at the papers calmly, peering over his reading glasses. He didn't look surprised. "Calm down, Alan," he said, gesturing to the chair. "Calm down. Did you see the news? They said I went to a private school. They said they paid for my car." "I saw it," Henderson said. "It's a good strategy. They're trying to force you to settle. They want you to panic and write them a check just to make the noise stop. Is that what you want to do?" "Hell no," I said. "I'd rather burn the money." "Good," Henderson said. He tapped the legal file. "Because legally they have a case." I stared at him. "You're joking." "I wish I were," Henderson sighed. "The filial responsibility statute in this state is clear. If the parents are indigent and on paper they look broke and the child has the financial ability to support them, the court can order payment. It doesn't matter if you don't like them. It doesn't matter if they were distant." "So that's it?" I asked, feeling a cold hopelessness wash over me. "I just have to pay them for being terrible parents?" "Not necessarily," Henderson said. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "There is an exemption clause. It's called just cause. If we can prove that they deserted you, or that there was a pattern of neglect or abuse that severed the family bond effectively before you were an adult, we can get the case dismissed." "I told you they didn't beat me," I said, rubbing my temples. "There are no police reports, no CPS files. It was just coldness. It was neglect. But how do I prove that in court? It's their word against mine. And they're great actors." Henderson leaned back in his chair. "We need evidence, Alan. Hard evidence. Do you have old diaries, letters, emails?" I thought about it. I shook my head. "No, I threw everything away when I moved out." "Think hard," Henderson pressed. "Anything from your childhood that contradicts their loving parents' narrative." I sat there, listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall. I closed my eyes, trying to dig through the wreckage of my childhood. And then I remembered. It was a flash of memory, a rainy afternoon, my 12th birthday, the one gift I had actually liked. "My uncle," I whispered. "What?" "My Uncle Dave," I said. "He gave me a digital voice recorder for my 12th birthday, a little grey plastic thing. I wanted to be a spy." "Okay," Henderson said, looking interested. "Did you record anything?" "I recorded everything," I said, the memory sharpening. "I used to leave it running under the couch to catch the dog barking or to..." The courthouse was an imposing brick building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked in through the side entrance to avoid the two local reporters who were camped out on the main steps, but I could still feel the weight of their judgment through the walls. Inside, Courtroom 4 was packed. In a small town, a lawsuit involving a lottery winner and abandoned parents was the equivalent of the Super Bowl. People I had known my whole life. Neighbors, old classmates. The lady who ran the bakery filled the gallery. They whispered behind their hands as I walked down the center aisle. "That's him," I heard someone murmur. "The guy who won't help his mum." I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the back of Mr. Henderson's suit jacket. I took my seat at the defense table. My hands were cold, but my palms were sweating. At the plaintiff's table, my parents were already seated. They had really committed to the bit. Linda was wearing a faded, oversized cardigan that made her look frail. Robert was wearing a suit that looked 2 sizes too big, as if he had withered away from starvation. They didn't look at me. They stared straight ahead, radiating a practiced, mournful dignity. Their lawyer, Mr. Snyder, was a sharp-featured man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like he enjoyed destroying people. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Reynolds swept in. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the packed courtroom with annoyance. "This is a family court matter," she stated, her voice echoing. "I will not tolerate outbursts from the gallery. If I hear a whisper, I will clear this room." She looked at the files in front of her. Case 4092, Miller v. Miller, petition for support under Statute 23A. She looked up. "Mr. Snyder, you may proceed." Snyder stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't use a podium. He walked back and forth in front of the judge, using the space like a stage. "Your Honor," Snyder began, his voice smooth and grave, "we are here today because of a tragedy. Not a death, but a death of conscience. My clients, Robert and Linda Miller, are good people, hard-working people. They raised a son. They fed him, clothed him, and sacrificed their own dreams so he could have a future." He pointed a finger at me. I didn't flinch, though every instinct in my body wanted to run. "And now, that son has been blessed with a fortune beyond imagination," Snyder continued, $50 million. "And yet, when his parents, the people who gave him life, came to him in their hour of need, sick and destitute, he didn't just turn them away. He mocked them. The law is clear, Your Honor. Filial responsibility exists for this exact reason, to ensure that the elderly are not discarded like trash by the children they raised." He called Linda to the stand first. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "Mrs. Miller," Snyder asked gently, "can you tell the court about Alan's childhood?" Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Oh, he was a spirited boy. We didn't have much money. Bob worked at the plant and I cleaned houses, but we made sure Alan had everything." "Did you pay for extracurricular activities?" "Yes," she lied, her voice trembling. "He wanted to play the piano. We couldn't afford lessons, so I sold my mother's engagement ring to pay for a tutor. I never told him. I just wanted him to be happy." I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Liar. I had never touched a piano in my life. "And his education?" "We paid for private tutors," she continued, looking at the judge with wide, wet eyes. "He struggled in math. We hired a specialist. It cost us our vacation fund for 3 years straight, but we did it. We loved him so much." "And now," Snyder asked, "how are your finances now?" "Gone," she whispered. "We spent everything on him, and now, with my hip and Bob's heart condition, we can't work. We just wanted a little help. We didn't want to be a burden." She broke down sobbing. The gallery made a collective, sympathetic noise. I could feel their hatred burning into the back of my neck. Robert took the stand next. He played the role of the stoic, broken father perfectly. "I'm a proud man, Your Honor," Robert said, looking down at his hands. "I never wanted to ask my son for money. It shames me. But seeing my wife in pain, seeing us about to lose our home, I had no choice." "Did you love your son, Mr. Miller?" Snyder asked. Robert looked directly at me for the first time. His eyes were cold, dead sharks. "I loved him more than my own life," he lied. "I worked double shifts at the warehouse until my back gave out, just so he could have the newest sneakers, so he could fit in. I destroyed my body for that boy." When it was Mr. Henderson's turn to cross-examine, he was brief. "Mr. Miller," Henderson said, standing up slowly, "you claim you paid for private tutors." "Yes," Robert said defiantly. "Do you have receipts, bank statements, checks?" "It was cash," Robert said quickly. "We paid under the table to get a better rate." "Convenient," Henderson murmured. "And the piano lessons? Cash as well?" Yes, cash. No further questions. It felt like we were losing. The lack of evidence on their part didn't seem to matter. Their emotional narrative was overwhelming. The judge looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and disappointment. "Mr. Miller, please take the stand," the judge said to me. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. Snyder didn't waste time. He pounced like a wolf. "Mr. Miller," he said, leaning on the railing, "you won $50 million. Is that correct?" "After taxes, $32 million, I said. $32 million, Snyder repeated, letting the number hang in the air. "And yet, you refused to give your parents $10 million. You refused to give them even a monthly allowance. Is that correct?" "I offered them $10,000, I said. They threw it in my face." "10,000, Snyder scoffed. 0.03% of your wealth. You offered them crumbs. Do you hate your parents, Mr. Miller?" "I don't hate them," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I don't owe them. They were not the loving parents they are pretending to be. They were landlords. They billed me for my existence." "Can you prove that?" Snyder snapped. "Can you prove they didn't sell a ring for your piano lessons? Can you prove they didn't love you?" I hesitated. "I can't prove a negative." "Exactly," Snyder said, turning to the judge with a triumphant smirk. "He has no proof, just the greed of a man who won the lottery and forgot where he came from. No further questions." I walked back to my seat. I felt defeated. My parents were whispering to each other, small smiles playing on their lips. They thought they had won. They thought the check was already written. Mr. Henderson leaned over to me. "Are you ready?" "Do it," I whispered. Mr. Henderson stood up. He buttoned his jacket. His demeanor changed. The sleepy country lawyer vanished, replaced by a shark that had just smelled blood. "Your Honor," Henderson said, his voice booming slightly, "the defense has one final piece of evidence to submit." Judge Reynolds looked over her glasses. "This late in the trial, is it relevant?" "Highly relevant, Your Honor," Henderson said. "It goes to the core of the plaintiff's testimony regarding their sacrifices and emotional bond with the defendant. It challenges the credibility of their entire narrative under the just cause exemption for filial support." Snyder stood up. "Objection. Ambush tactics." "Overruled," the judge said. "What is it?" Henderson reached into his briefcase. He didn't pull out a document. He pulled out a small, clear plastic bag containing a battered, grey plastic device, and next to it, a USB drive. "This," Henderson said, holding up the bag, "is a Panasonic cassette recorder. It belonged to the defendant when he was a child. And this USB drive contains a digitized, forensic copy of the audio tape found inside it." My parents stopped smiling. Robert went rigid. Linda's hand flew to her throat. "The date of the recording," Henderson said, checking his notes, "is November 12, 1998, the defendant's 12th birthday." "Objection," Snyder shouted, sensing the shift in the room. "A recording from 1998? This is preposterous. We can't verify who is speaking. It could be anyone. We have authenticated the voice prints against the plaintiff's current deposition tapes," Henderson said calmly. "It's a 99% match, and we have an affidavit from the audio forensic lab attesting that the tape has not been altered or spliced." Henderson walked toward the judge's bench. "The plaintiffs claim they loved their son. They claim they viewed him as a treasure," Henderson said, turning to look at my parents. "Let's hear what they had to say when they thought no one was listening." The courtroom went deadly silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. The judge nodded. "Play it." Henderson plugged the USB drive into the court's AV system. A projection screen lowered, showing a generic audio player interface. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I looked at my parents. They weren't acting anymore. They looked terrified. Henderson moved the mouse. He hovered over the play button. And then he clicked. The speakers mounted on the courtroom walls crackled. It was a sharp, hissing sound, the unmistakable white noise of a cheap magnetic tape recorder running in a quiet room. The court reporter stopped typing. The gallery leaned forward as one, a sea of held breaths. Then a sound cut through the static. The pop hiss of a soda can opening. Then the dull hum of a television in the background. And then a voice. It was Robert's voice. It sounded younger, less gravelly than the man sitting at the plaintiff's table. But the cadence was identical. "God, did you see his face when he opened that card?" The voice on the recording sneered. "He actually looked inside for money, like a little rat sniffing for cheese." In the courtroom, Robert stiffened. His eyes went wide, staring at the speaker on the wall as if it were a ghost. A woman's voice laughed. It was Linda. "He's 12, Bob. He probably wanted $5 for the arcade, but $5 is a pack of cigarettes. He can deal with a card." "I'm sick of it, Linda," Robert's voice groaned. "I'm sick of him eating us out of house and home. Do you know how much the grocery bill was this week? He eats like a horse. It's a waste of resources." On the stand, I saw Linda's hand cover her mouth. Her face, previously flushed with fake tears, drained of all color. The recording continued. "It's an investment," Linda's recorded voice said soothingly. "Calm down. I did the math with the caseworker yesterday. As long as he stays in school and we don't get flagged by CPS, the state tax credit plus the welfare adjustment puts us ahead by about $400 a month. He's profit, Bob. Pure profit." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. She turned her head slowly to look at the plaintiffs. "Profit?" Robert's voice spat. "Is it worth the headache? Having him mope around here? I have to pretend to give a damn. It's exhausting." "You don't have to pretend that hard," Linda laughed. It was a cruel, cold sound. "Just don't hit him where it shows. That's the only rule. Feed him the cheap stuff, keep him in hand-me-downs, and bank the rest. We're saving for that boat, remember?" "The boat," Robert sighed dreamily on the tape. "Yeah, that's the only thing keeping me from kicking him out tonight." 6 more years, Linda said. Her voice turned sharp, calculated. "That's the timeline. The very second the clock strikes midnight on his 18th birthday, the contract is up. I don't care if it's snowing, I don't care if he's sick. We change the locks, we put his trash bag on the curb, and we turn his room into that home gym you wanted." "And the college fund?" Robert asked mockingly. "What college fund?" Linda laughed again. "That money is for us, Bob. We earned it. Putting up with him for 18 years, that's our severance package." "Useless little accident," Robert muttered. "I wish we'd never had him." "Don't say that," Linda said. "Just think of him as a tenant who pays rent in government checks. Just a roommate we hate. 6 more years, Bob. Then we're free." Click. The tape ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and total. I stared at the table. I had heard that recording a dozen times in the last week, but hearing it here, in public, stripped away the last layer of doubt I had ever held. They didn't just fail to love me. They had actively monetized my existence. I looked up. Mr. Snyder, the opposing lawyer, was staring at his own clients with a look of pure horror. He slowly closed his file folder. He knew it was over. He knew he had been suborning perjury for the last hour. My parents looked small. Linda was trembling. She looked toward the gallery, perhaps hoping for sympathy, but she found none. The faces of the townspeople, the neighbors, the shopkeepers were twisted in disgust. The David versus Goliath story had just flipped. Now, they saw 2 monsters who had cannibalized a child for boat money. Robert was staring at the table, his face a deep, blotchy purple. He looked like a man who wanted to disappear but had nowhere to go. Judge Reynolds sat motionless for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she took off her glasses and placed them on the bench. She looked down at my parents. "In 20 years on the bench," Judge Reynolds said, her voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room, I have heard many things. I have heard confessions of theft, of violence, of fraud, but I have rarely heard anything as spiritually bankrupt as what I just heard. She picked up the file in front of her, the lawsuit claiming Filial Support. You came into my courtroom, she continued, her voice rising with controlled anger, under the guise of destitute parents seeking the mercy of a law designed to honor the family bond. You swore under oath that you sacrificed for this man, that you sold heirlooms for his education. She gestured toward the screen where the audio file was still displayed. And yet, your own voices condemn you. You admitted to viewing your son not as a human being, but as a mechanism for tax credits. You admitted to a conspiracy to defraud him of a home the moment your legal obligation ended. Your Honor, if I may, Snyder tried to interject, though his heart wasn't in it. Sit down, counselor, Judge Reynolds snapped. The gavel banged, making everyone jump. She turned her gaze back to Robert and Linda. It was a withering glare. You speak of filial responsibility. That law requires a reciprocal relationship. It requires that the parents acted as parents. You were not parents. You were, by your own admission, roommates who hated him. You were jailers. She grabbed her pen and slashed it across the paper in front of her. I am dismissing this petition immediately, and let the record show that the dismissal is with prejudice. She leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, you are lucky that the statute of limitations has passed on the fraud you committed regarding those welfare checks. But let me be very clear. If you ever attempt to contact the defendant again, if you ever step foot on his property, or if I hear that you have filed so much as a noise complaint against him, I will find a way to put you behind bars for harassment. Do you understand me? My parents nodded weakly. They didn't speak. They couldn't. Case dismissed, Judge Reynolds said, standing up. Get out of my sight. The gavel came down one last time. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot. It sounded like a starting pistol. It sounded like freedom. The sound of the gavel seemed to hang in the air for a long time, vibrating in the wood of the table beneath my hands. For a moment, nobody moved. It was as if the entire room was afraid that moving would break the spell. Then, the shuffling began. My parents didn't look back at me. They didn't look at the judge. They didn't even look at their own lawyer. They moved with the frantic, jerky energy of insects exposed to sudden light. Robert grabbed his coat, knocking a chair over in the process and not bothering to pick it up. Linda clutched her purse to her chest. Her head bowed so low her chin touched her collarbone. They scrambled down the center aisle, pushing through the swinging wooden gate. The crowd in the gallery, the same people who had whispered about my greed an hour ago, parted like the Red Sea. Nobody said a word to them. No one offered a sympathetic hand. They just watched them run. Mr. Snyder, their lawyer, was left standing alone at his table. He looked at the empty space where his clients had been, then looked at Mr. Henderson. He gave a curt, professional nod, a silent admission of defeat, and began packing his briefcase with deliberate speed. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, not from fear, but from the sudden release of adrenaline. Mr. Henderson turned to me and smiled. It wasn't a shark smile this time. It was the warm, tired smile of a grandfather. It's over, Alan, he said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. With prejudice. That's the magic phrase. It means the door is locked, bolted, and welded shut. They can never sue you for this again. Thank you, I said. My voice was raspy. I don't know how to thank you. You already paid my retainer, he chuckled. That's thanks enough. Go home, son. Enjoy your life. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was cooler than the courtroom. The air felt cleaner. As I pushed through the heavy double doors to the outside steps, the sun hit my face. It was blindingly bright. The reporters were there, of course. They saw me coming and surged forward, microphones raised like spears. Mr. Miller, do you have a comment? Is it true your parents admitted to fraud? How do you feel about the verdict? I stopped on the top step. I looked at them. A month ago, their questions would have made me want to hide in a hole. A month ago, I was terrified of what they would write about me. But now the truth was on the record. I put on my sunglasses. I didn't say a word. I just walked past them, through the crowd, and across the parking lot to my truck. I got in, shut the door, and locked it. The silence inside the cab was beautiful. It wasn't the lonely silence of my childhood bedroom. It was the peaceful silence of a fortress. I drove home. I took the long way back, driving down winding country roads, where the trees created a canopy of green overhead. I rolled the windows down. I listened to the wind rushing by. When I finally turned onto my gravel driveway, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of purple and orange. My farmhouse stood there, waiting for me. It looked different today. Before, it had felt like a hideout. Now, it felt like a home. I parked the truck. I walked up the porch steps, the same steps where I had written that $10,000 check. The same steps where Robert had screamed at me. I looked at the spot where the check had landed. It was gone, blown away by the wind. I went inside and walked to the kitchen. I brewed a pot of coffee. While it brewed, I went to the living room. I took the small grey plastic bag Mr. Henderson had given me back, the one containing the tape recorder and the USB drive. I held it for a moment. That little plastic box had saved my life. It held the ghosts of my past, trapped on magnetic tape. I walked over to the fireplace. I thought about throwing it in. It would be dramatic. It would be cinematic. But I didn't. That would be destroying evidence. And I was a practical man. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet. I pulled down a heavy lockbox where I kept my deed and my passport. I placed the recorder inside. I locked it. I put the key on my key ring. I wasn't going to destroy the past, but I wasn't going to live in it anymore either. It was filed away. Case closed. I poured my coffee and walked out onto the back porch. The sun had dipped below the tree line, leaving a soft twilight over my 20 acres. The crickets were starting their evening chorus. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, and perfect. I thought about Robert and Linda. They were probably driving back to their house right now, arguing, blaming each other, trapped in the miserable web they had spun for themselves. They had lost their son, their reputation, and their lottery ticket. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the sadness, but neither came. There was only a lightness, a vast, quiet emptiness where the burden used to be. I leaned back in my rocking chair and watched the first star appear in the evening sky. I was Alan Miller. I was 34 years old. I was free. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see what tomorrow looked like.